I would absolutely bet everything on an experience rather than a spreadsheet. I set out with a purpose. When I looked at glamping, I had kind of fresh eyes to it. The industry had been around for 10, 15 years, and everybody still kind of treated it like an addition to a campsite. But it always baffled me when it came to glamping. I remember distinctly when I was a kid, I used to go camping with my mum and dad and my brother quite often. And I remember, we'd go and we'd set up the tent and we'd spend like an hour or so getting all that set up and everything else. And then we walked away from it. And we'd go and swim in a river or climb a tree or whatever it was we were doing on that camping holiday. What we didn't do was sit in a tent for 2 days. So it always baffled me when I came to the glamping industry why everybody focused on what essentially is the tent. A really fancy tent in some circumstances. Now we've got tree houses and geodomes and yurts and everything else, but for all intents and purposes, they're just a really fancy tent. I always remember the camping trips and I have great fond memories of them, and it was nothing to do with the tent, it was everything else that we did. So my initial outlook on all of it was always, what are they going to do when they're there? What is that experience going to be? How are they going to interact with nature? And ultimately, it's just getting them to spend more time outdoors. If you make inside so comfortable and outside so unappealing, you're never going to get anybody doing anything else except for sitting on a bed and watching Netflix. And I can do that at home. So that can be sitting in the woodland at night, watching the bats fly over and that sort of thing. Or equally, it could be somewhere like the site in Cornwall, where you go in, staying there, looking at the sea, going surfing, that sort of thing. So a glamping trip is basically, it's a modern version of an adventure with the luxuries that you can have at home. Most people don't want to really traipse through mud anymore. I always talk about minimum standards in the industry. So as long as you've got heating, lighting, comfy bed, internet, those sorts of things, then everything else past that from a unit point of view is kind of irrelevant. Whether you've got gold taps or really expensive flooring, they have a place and there is a market for it to some degree, but once you get to that minimum standard level, it's everything else that you can do above and beyond the unit. That's what we've always focused on at the Secret Garden.